Here at Living in the Sprawl, we make it a point to check out and try local cuisine wherever we visit. We all have those foods and places that trigger nostalgia or that we crave after a super memorable trip. Goldbelly makes it easy to find your favorite foods, or try new ones, in just a couple of clicks from wherever you are in the world. Goldbelly also makes it easy to send delicious, unique gifts to your loved ones, whether it's Lou Malnati's deep dish from Chicago, a Philly cheesesteak from Pat's, or a slice of heaven from Junior's Cheesecakes in New York. They add new places almost daily, so click on the link in the show notes or on our website to check them out and let them know we sent you. Hi listeners, Jon and I have tried multiple brands and forms of CBD over the last 2 years. I use it for inflammation and to help with what we call stressies here at Living in the Sprawl. And Jon uses it right before bed for better sleep quality. After our search, we have found one that works great for both of us. We are huge fans of Just CBD sugar-free gummies. They are great tasting and offer a variety of different flavors and strengths. If tinctures or topicals are more your speed, they have options for those as well. They have a great customer service team that I have personally worked with, are cost-effective compared to other brands out there, and offer free shipping on orders over $35. Just CBD store is offering our listeners 20% off every order when you use the link in the show notes or on our website and the code SPRAWL, SPRAWL. Check them out and let us know what you think.
Hello, and welcome to another installment of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. My name is Jon Steinberg. I am your humble correspondent and host. Sitting alongside me, as always, is my lovely and immensely talented producer slash fiance. Her name is Lisa Lowe, and this week we have a tremendous topic in store to bring to you guys. Something near and dear to my heart, a subject that I have been wanting to cover on the podcast since we launched, and I was overjoyed to be able to assemble this particular list and do some additional research so that we might bring to you a comprehensive examination of what we believe to be the 10 coolest movie theaters in Southern California. In Eastern France, around the turn of the century, the Lumiere brothers ushered in a whole new way to see the world. These French brothers showed us a world that we could only dream of, whether we lived near the ocean or the desert, had a great deal of money or none at all. The ability to see these diverse worlds and perspectives brought to us on the screen was nothing short of a revelation. In 1905, the first Nickelodeon theater opened in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And in the ensuing years and decades, Southern California claimed movie making as its greatest pastime. Every single day, I'm reminded of Southern California's most notable export. You can't help but drive down Sunset or Hollywood, Santa Monica, Wilshire, Melrose, all of the major thoroughfare streets that run from east to west in Los Angeles are lined with billboards reminding you that indeed this is the land of the movies. And along with that incredible domineering export, we have a cornucopia of phenomenal locations where you can sit down and see what everyone's been making on the big screen. So again, we've assembled our 10 favorite movie theaters in the region. Now, I will begin the episode with an asterisk by saying this is one of those topics that I could have gone at least 50 deep. So it was a genuinely difficult activity to winnow the field down to a scant 10 entries. But alas, we've done that. and are pleased to bring you the results. At number 10, we're going to start in Long Beach, the Art Theater. Once a thriving cross-section of independent movie houses, today Long Beach only has the one, but it's a great one, and it's the Art Theater. Opened in 1925 as the Carter, the theater has gone through a series of alterations, facelifts, and renovations to help it age with the times. In 1933, the theater, as everything in the region, was impacted by the terrible earthquake. So restoration was in order, and by the 40s and then into the 50s, 60s, 70s, the theater did manage to survive as it enjoyed a wide swath of repeat customers who loved seeing their favorite stars on the big screen with an orchestra playing beautiful music right in front of their faces to coincide with the events being chronicled on the screen. Now, as the other 50-some-odd movie theaters went out of business one by one, the Art stood strong. And today, you have the ability to see the latest in independent movie making. Sometimes their calendar does include some larger scale releases. When I went for the first time, I saw Sofia Coppola's The Bling Ring, and I was just struck by how sublime the experience truly was. Long Beach isn't necessarily known as a bastion of cultural innovation as far as the region is concerned, but the Art Theater, a one-screen it's not a multiplex, it's just a one-screen theater that transports you to the 1920s, to an era when flappers dominated the fashion and people seemed to speak 10 times faster than they do now. So, beginning our journey, our excavation of the region's coolest movie theaters, we begin with number 10, the Art Theater in Long Beach. At number 9, we find ourselves on Beverly Boulevard, standing in front of the hallowed grounds of the New Beverly Theater. This, not quite a palace. Well, it's not a palace, but it is a historic example of a revival movie theater. This dates back to the 1920s. Originally, it was a candy store, but by the 50s, it had been converted into a single-screen theater. And this place has had a real barrage of different kinds of films that it has screened in the subsequent decades. As Margot Robbie's Sharon Tate points out in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, after dining at the El Coyote Cafe, which is across the street, I didn't know they had premieres for Dirty Pictures. She looks over at the movie theater across the street, and alas, she's looking at the New Beverly because they're playing an adult film in 1969. A couple things to unpack there. The theater did, in fact, show adult movies for a number of years, as well as independent cinema and LGBTQ cinema. It's had a lot of different versions since it has come into existence. The New Beverly is now owned by the director of the film I just referenced, Quentin Tarantino. He's owned the theater since 2007, and he is personally responsible for much of the programming on display at the New Beverly. When I went with my uncle, and we saw a really fun screening of the 90s classic, The Birdcage. There are some really nifty old-timey posters that line the walls once you walk inside. A fun kind of throwback concession stand with popcorn and all the refreshments that you've come to expect from a movie-going experience. And the theater is pretty centrally located in a rather interesting part of the city. Some fantastic restaurants nearby. The aforementioned El Coyote across the street. There's a great Italian spot that's also across the street. A very noteworthy Korean place that's down a couple of blocks. Just a fun region within kind of the Hollywood area where you have the ability to pay the ticket, take the ride, and find yourself in the hands of probably the greatest filmmaker that the city has ever produced, in my own opinion. So, we urge you, if you find yourself in the area, or even if you don't, make a trip out so that you can check out a film at the New Beverly Theater. Number 8, the Van Buren Drive-In Theater in Riverside, the Arlington section of Riverside. Opened in 1964, the drive-in originally had only a single screen to offer customers, but quickly they expanded to 3 screens. And it's rare that a drive-in would survive now into its 6th decade. But this local favorite, and the first time that I ever experienced a drive-in feature film, has been a real crowd pleaser since it opened. The drive-in concept was born in Camden, New Jersey in 1933, and at one point, hundreds of drive-in theaters enjoyed great fanfare all across the country. Unfortunately, with easy access to televisions and other forms of entertainment, drive-ins are not thriving the way that they once were. And there's only between 40 and 50 in operation at the moment across the country. And we are lucky that we have one of the best ones. The lovely and talented producer / fiance sitting next to me and I had an opportunity to check out really memorable kind of bizarre but supremely entertaining film called Becky at the Van Buren Drive-In, and we had a wonderful time. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from a drive-in in the 2020s. How was the sound going to be? Would we be distracted by cars surrounding our own? A number of different concerns and questions that I had going into the experience were quickly assuaged by the sheer ability to sit in a parked vehicle and watch a movie outdoors. It was a lot of fun. I get the appeal. I'm someone who grew up with stories from his father about times that he'd spent at the drive-in movie theater with his family, and it's something that I probably will do with my own as time marches on. And there are a couple of options. Again, this is the land of movie making, so we are blessed with a little bit of variety in this regard. But any discussion of drive-in movie theaters in Southern California should absolutely begin with the Van Buren in Riverside. Number 7, the Vista Theater. This single-screen movie shrine, which has been around since the 1920s, was where Alabama, played by Patricia Arquette, wandered into the middle of a Sonny Chiba feature on Clarence's birthday at the beginning of True Romance. The movie, well, at that point, the movie took place in Detroit, but that whole sequence was shot at the Vista. Additionally, when John Travolta's Chili Palmer is watching the old movie during Get Shorty while Rene Russo wanders into the theater, that's also the Vista. Another one of the truly classic theaters that we are so fortunate to have in our neck of the woods. The Vista does play host to first-run movies, meaning some of the larger big studio fare does come out at the Vista. Pound for pound, this might be my favorite theater-going experience in the city of Los Angeles. The theater's kind of located on the border of Los Feliz, Silver Lake, East Hollywood, Virgil Village. It's kind of in that undefinable cluster that seems to hit all of those neighborhoods while not being directly located in any one of them. A great auditorium that, again, will transport you back to the golden age of the entertainment industry while you watch the latest blockbuster brought to us by the current version of the entertainment industry. Again, a really impressive selection of refreshments for you and a killer marquee out front that is ideally situated for those of you interested in taking photographs for social media. I love the vista, and I think that you will too. And number 6, inside the West Side Pavilion, we have the flagship location of large-scale chain, The Landmark. I've been to this theater more times than I could count. My grandparents live basically across the street, and so I would often wander over to the West Side Pavilion and into a screen at The Landmark. This theater is kind of the best of both worlds. They do offer the latest large-scale, couple $100 budget releases, while also featuring much smaller titles from independent-minded directors and writers. Additionally, the theater often hosts Q&A sessions with writers, directors, performers, and will sometimes do kind of special one-off events. Given the uncertainty surrounding the ArcLight Hollywood, I would put this as the best place to take the whole family to a movie in the city. Again, it is part of the mall, which, if you're listening to this in the future, might already be known as the Google Pavilion. I'm not exactly sure, but the vast array of screens within the multiplex, combined with the robust selection of fare that does play here, enables an entire family to experience this incredible theater. And not everyone has to be watching the same movie at the same time. Really phenomenal pretzels here, by the way, just for the record. The Landmark, as I mentioned, is a chain, and normally chains are something that I don't like discussing on the show, but in this particular instance, this happens to be the flagship location of the entire company, and when you go, you will absolutely see why. It's an immaculate theater kept in pristine condition with all of the options that you would want during a day at the movies. So, if this sounds like something that you'd be interested in, highly implore you, please check out the flagship location of The Landmark. And number 5, Edwards Big Newport in Newport Beach. A theater that I grew up going to, and on Friday nights, or even just the first weekend that a major release would come out. And I don't experience this too much anymore, but it was nice as a kid. And perhaps it was at least a small reason why I became enamored with movies as I did. A gentleman would come out and preach on the film right before the credits began to roll. So, quick sidebar. I went to see Toy Story with my father, and the gentleman who would come out and introduce films stood in front of a group of 3,000 people, more than half of which were children, and proceeded to go on a whole spiel saying, "And now we bring to you the third installment. This action-packed, heart-racing thriller will have you on the edge of your seats. We bring to you Die Hard with a Vengeance." And a lot of the parents in the crowd kind of yelled him down, said, "Toy Story, Toy Story." And it was an incredible moment that I'll never forget. In any event, this theater, which when that gentleman was speaking, he would always announce the largest theater west of the Mississippi. There are roughly 3,000 seats inside the largest screen at the Big Newport. And the theater opened in February of 1969 as a one-screen mega palace. And in the years since its founding, 2 additional screens were added in the main building. And then in the late 90s, they added an additional 4 more that were known as the Stadium, that were in a different building but still on site. Edwards, also a chain of sorts, has this location as the flagship. And Mr. Edwards had his personal office at the Big Newport until his death. And whether it was the awful 90s Godzilla with Matthew Broderick, or the Batman Forever with Jim Carrey and Nicole Kidman, or even the last Transformers movie with Mark Wahlberg, T-shirts are sold or sometimes given out, or posters, little pieces of movie memorabilia that help customers remember the experience for all times. I have so many personal anecdotes that took place inside this theater, whether it was convincing someone over the age of 17 to buy 5 of my friends and I tickets the night Fight Club opened, or watching one of my juvenile delinquent, just kidding, best friends go into the main auditorium and try to open up the side door during Bruce Almighty to get some other people in for free. There have been a ton of memories forged at this Palace of Cinema, and it still exists, and it just simply rocks. So even those of you that are dubious about Orange County and would think, oh, well, why would we go down to Newport Beach? There's everything you could ever want on this topic in Los Angeles. Give Newport Beach's Big Newport a try. I do not think that you'll be disappointed. Number 4, the Fox Westwood Village Theater. So there's this little corridor of Westwood that can be best described as a movie lover's paradise. If you find yourself on Weyburn and Broxton, you'll notice the Bruin Theater on one side of the street and the Fox on the other. The Landmark crest is just around the corner. You have 3 iconic movie palaces that are within like 2 blocks of each other. It's really quite spectacular. And though I considered adding the Bruin to the list just for the sake of variety, I decided to stick with the Fox for this particular discussion. Another one of these completely over-the-top, marvelous movie palaces. This one was built in 1930. It officially opened in 1931. And for those of you that have been to the area, or even those of you that have seen pictures, you will no doubt recognize the tower sticking out of the top of this movie palace, proclaiming the word Fox. And even though this theater has now been around for 90 years, it still serves as a venue for big-time movie premieres and industry functions. When I was a kid, I had an opportunity to go to the premiere of Any Given Sunday with my father at the theater, and it was, needless to say, a remarkable experience, one that I'll never forget. Seeing Al Pacino in the flesh, him being my favorite actor, was a milestone, and I did not even have the pleasure of meeting him. He literally just walked by me. But this quintessential Los Angeles palace is a really great place to see, frankly, anything. As of this recording, they are showing mainstream blockbuster type fare, but depending on the time of year, you might find more independent-minded award season fodder playing at this hallowed palace of cinema. Situated in the amazing Westwood Village, the architecture within this few block radius is kind of unexpectedly breathtaking if you've never seen it. This area was planned by the Jantz Company to coincide with the opening of UCLA, and they derived a lot of the inspiration from Spain and the Spanish architecture that found favor in a lot of different parts of the country, but being the location of UCLA, it's this incredible mixture of college town, architecturally significant throwback, and ode to the city's enduring industry, that being, of course, the entertainment industry. So, if you've only got a couple of days in the City of Angels, maybe consider spending one of them in Westwood Village while taking in a picture at the Fox Westwood Village. And number 3, we go back to Hollywood, because we have to discuss the El Capitan Theater, one of the most famous in all of the country, nay, in all of the world. The El Capitan has been around since 1926. It's gone through a number of iterations, but since the late 80s, it has been owned by the Walt Disney Corporation. And after a large-scale renovation, the theater, under the Walt Disney label, did kind of reintroduce itself to the world in 1991 with a premiere of a movie I loved as a kid, The Rocketeer. Now, I am someone who's not in love with the Walt Disney Company, but in the case of the El Capitan, I'll make an exception. I am a childless adult, but if I did have a youngster in tow, I'd consider strongly taking them to a Disney sing-along at the El Capitan. I went a few years ago for the old Mary Poppins and had a delightful time. There's a fun kind of soda fountain Disney store, which is adjacent to the theater. And if you're someone who grew up with Disney films and you are looking to kind of relive that part of your life without having to endure the expense and time of a trip to Disneyland, then a voyage to the El Capitan might be the way to go. Anytime Disney releases one of its large-scale blockbusters, it comes out at the El Capitan, and its incredible signage combined with a marquee that rivals the best in the area, I would say the El Capitan absolutely deserves a spot on this or any other list of the best movie theaters in Southern California. At number 2, the Arrow in Santa Monica. So this was commissioned by Donald Douglas of the Douglas Corporation, who wanted employees who were making airplanes at his company to be able to have a fun night out. So in order to keep morale at a decent level and employees happy, the Arrow Theater was born in 1940 on Montana Avenue on the west side. This theater is now owned in partnership with Cinematheque, who also have a hand in the Egyptian theater, and they specialize in selective programming. So when your humble correspondent and host and his lovely and talented producer/fiance attended a screening of Motherless Brooklyn a couple years back, Edward Norton was in the audience and submitted to a full-fledged Q&A after the movie concluded. A great place to have a real cinema-oriented experience. This is not the place to see Fast and Furious 9 or Cruella. This is absolutely the place to see whatever it is happens to be on the calendar, because a great deal of thought and care has gone into its selection. I keep bringing this up because I think it is part of the deal. The Arrow has a spectacular marquee in front that has been seen in Donnie Darko, for example. A couple of other movies have been shot there. And here's a suggestion. One of the best burgers in the entire city is offered at a place called Father's Office, which is down the street from the Arrow. So if you have an opportunity and you see something that you're interested in on the calendar, would highly recommend going to Father's office for the burger, and then the Arrow for a screening of undoubtedly something immensely impressive. Number 1, the Cinerama Dome. This iconic venue opened in 1963 and has played host to hundreds of events, premieres, Q&As, all manner of movie-esque events have taken place here. The Dome is extremely recognizable, and thank goodness the building is on the National Register of Historic Places and is a Los Angeles cultural landmark. A couple of years ago, I had a chance to see the premiere of Once Upon a Time, or one of the premieres of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, as the theater was hosting a weekend of Tarantino's films, Once Upon a Tarantino, and the guy was there and introduced the movie, and he'd had a couple of drinks and was saying some really interesting stuff, and it was a great experience. If you only had one theater, I would pick this over all other entrants, as it kind of exemplifies the gaudy, over-the-top nature of the medium in the city that specializes in said medium, but it's accessible, unlike a couple of the other sort of art house single-screen theaters mentioned by me. The Cinerama Dome is so massive and caters to any and everyone, so that it's not a niche experience whatsoever. You could take your grandmother to, I don't know, see Despicable Me 4, or whatever movie happens to be playing there that is of a family-friendly nature. The screen is huge, kind of reminds me of the scoreboard at Cowboy Stadium in Arlington, Texas. And I've had a chance to be there for a Q&A with Nicole Kidman and a whole bunch of really great and some, admittedly, not so great movies at the Cinerama Dome. It's a really special place. I think about the movie Happy Gilmore and the happy place where he goes in order to excel at putting. And if I'm ever in a less than wonderful mood or need to be reminded of how great it truly is to live in Southern California, then I would go to a movie at the Cinerama Dome. And that's going to do it for another episode of Living in the Sprawl. I want to thank all of our fantastic and loyal listeners. Jim for supporting us on Patreon. We've got content that'll be coming soon. If you do want to support us on Patreon, we will be offering some really fun stuff that is not going to be covered on the main feed. And if you'd like to support us in other ways, there are avenues to be able to do that. The Instagram handle, if you'd like to correspond and support us that way, Living in the Sprawl Podcast. Another great way to express your admiration for the show would be with a 5-star review and a kind comment or two. For some reason, 5-star reviews have an outsized impact on the way in which your podcast is received. It vaults you up the charts and exposes you to a wider audience. So those 5-star reviews really do help us. The comments, they really help us. If you'd like to reach out to us with suggestions as to topics you'd like to see discussed on the show, you can do that. Write us at livinginthesprawlpodcast@gmail.com. We would love to correspond with you. We've got a great episode coming in the next week that was suggested by a listener just like you. So for myself, your humble correspondent and host, I am Jon Steinberg, and my lovely and talented producer / fiance, she is Lisa Lowe. Thanking you for listening to another episode of Living in the Sprawl, Southern California's most adventurous podcast. Till next time.